Let's say you just bought a house. Bad news is, you're one step closer to becoming your parents. You'll proudly mow the lawn, ask if anybody noticed you mowed the lawn, tell people to stay off the lawn, compare it to your neighbor's lawn, and complain about having to mow the lawn again. Good news is, it's easy to bundle home and auto through Progressive and save on your car insurance, which, of course, will go right into the lawn. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company, affiliates, and other insurers. Discount not available in all states or situations.
Happy Memorial Day, everybody. This is Long Road to Ruin on the Radulich and Broadcasting Network. I'm your host, the mandated reporter, and frankly, I'm mortified, Mr. Mark Radulich. And if you've been getting inundated with alerts from the Radulich and Broadcasting Network Facebook page that we uploaded a billion shows, sorry. Was it my fault? It was Spreaker. It did it
Our
itself.
poor subscribers.
So sorry about that. I'm trying to fix it. It's been a mess this morning. Anyway, as I said, this is Long Road to Ruin. A little late. We were supposed to do this Thursday night, but life happens, and so we're doing it here on Memorial Day. Of course, joining me to talk about the first two John Wick movies, Mr. Wick, is Sean Comer. How you doing, Sean?
Hello, everyone. I'm Sean. You're not. Happy Memorial Day indeed. And rip to the notifications of all of you who clicked the bell icon when you subscribe. You poor, poor bastards. Mark was explaining this to me beforehand, and dear sweet baby Jeebus.
So on top of which, I finally found my laptop. It was right where I left it, which is next to my bed, but like beneath a whole bunch of books. So we've been cleaning, getting ready for my pending treatments and whatever. And my wife goes, "Oh, I found your laptop." My laptop is so out of date; it might as well be running Linux. So I've had to. So in between trying to fix the avalanche of updates from my podcasting account, I've also had to update my computer, which has just been fun. So yeah, happy Memorial Day to me. All right. So John Wick. The whole reason we're doing this is because I had actually never seen any of the John Wick movies before. And there was a John Wick 3 coming out, which we covered on Damn You Hollywood, and I thought, well, you know what? Since I haven't seen any of these, let's go ahead and dust off Long Road to Ruin. I'll watch the first two movies. Sean will watch them. We'll talk about them. And then I'll be prepared to go see John Wick 3 Parabellum. And now, for me, the whole reason, like, I'm not really interested in, like, the Hitman series, the Transporter, like, stuff like that. The movies for guys who like movies kind of a thing where, it's just one guy versus an army of henchmen, and it's a lot of kung fu / gun fu. Has really not been my thing. I tend to be more of the superhero, fantasy, monster mash variety. But these John Wick movies come heavily recommended by none other than the likes of Robert Winfrey and Andrew Graham and others. So I wanted to give it a chance. Now, why have you not seen these movies until now? What, just wasn't your thing or what?
Because it's rare that when something comes out and is brand new that I make the time to kind of glom onto it right away. I'm not an early adopter. When things come out and they're brand new, I tend to be, well, again, first there's the time factor, but then there's also the notion that I kind of don't want to be anyone's canary in the coal mine. I kind of want to let everybody else experience things first. If it's something like new tech or a video game, I want to let people kind of work out the bug. Or if it's the first couple episodes of a TV show, I want to give the makers some time to sort of adapt on the fly and evolve so that I can kind of absorb the best version of whatever it is. But that's a long way around just saying that in this case, I simply never got around to either of them. I heard all the praise and everything, and it came from highly reputable sources. So I just figured, okay, cool. One of these times when they come to streaming or something, I'll sit down with a pizza and a couple of beers and enjoy what sound like a couple of the best action movies to come down the pike in years. But until we decide to do a Long Road to Ruin, again, I just still hadn't gotten around to it. But now I'm a cable subscriber for the first time since about 2012 question mark, and we had them both available on demand, and so that is exactly what myself and Carrie did. She sat down and watched them both with me.
What'd you think of them?
Holy shit, astonishing. They're both just grand spectacles, but surprisingly artful in their own ways. I did enjoy the first far more than the second, and I just don't have any interesting trivia to share this time around. It isn't really based on any previous property. It's not an adaptation. They just kind of sort of just all of a sudden wham appeared, and all of a sudden caught fire with praise from audiences and critics alike. About the most interesting things I can say are that they've become so wildly popular that there is a TV show in development centered on the world and operations of the Continental. Wick himself is an officially licensed playable character in Payday 2. There are some John Wick-themed goodies that have been added to Fortnite. That game Starcher's kids fucking love. That were added to Fortnite upon the beginning of its 9th season. It was John Wick Hex has been announced as of this month as a turn-based tactical role-playing game to be published by Lionsgate Games, in which you're going to control Wick throughout various missions. He's going to use his very special set of skills to take down his opponents. Going to feature some actors from the movie reprising their roles. Basically, it sounds like a Hitman ripoff, which is not an entirely bad game because depending on when you entered that franchise, fucking hell, highly recommend playing it. Especially the episodic ones and Hitman Absolution, just my opinion. And back in 2017, it received its own comic book miniseries published by Dynamite, written by Greg Pak and drawn by Giovanni Valletta. And otherwise, it's just a movie that was originally developed about a retired contract killer comes out of retirement. The main quote that I found about it was that writer. Okay, I didn't even write his name down. Something Kolstad. Who was it? Derek Kolstad. That was his name. Derek Kolstad said, "The worst man in existence found salvation when the source of his salvation is ripped from him due to the Keanu Reeves was cast, and he's currently undergoing what can only be described as, I don't know, is it fair to call this a career renaissance? To call this his Pulp Fiction, to his John Travolta?
I don't know. Think? I mean, has he really fallen off in the last year? So maybe go check out his wiki page real quick.
I don't think he had necessarily fallen off. It's just that it had been a long time since I had really heard of anything where anybody went, holy shit, Keanu Reeves.
Let's see. So, 2018, he was in Replicas, Destination Wedding in Siberia. I think I've heard of one of those. 2017, he was in SPF 18 as himself. He has a cameo. A Happening of Monumental Proportions, John Wick 2, and To the Bone. I mean,
and don't get me wrong. To be clear, not a bad actor. In fact, he's one of those that when you really look at his best movies, you find yourself somewhat surprised by just how much range he has.
I mean, he has multiple projects pretty much every year for the last 10 years, it looks like. So, I mean,
He's been working steadily since The Matrix.
Yeah. So when I think of like John Travolta, his Pulp Fiction was his career renaissance. There was a period where I think the only work he got was the Look Who's Talking movies.
Yeah, that's true. That's a fair correction. He went through a period where it was just shit after shit after shit after shit. And I don't know, you could almost maybe Bruce Willis would almost be the better comparison.
Maybe.
Yeah.
He definitely has not had. He's got some. There's a pendulum with Keanu Reeves where some of the stuff is pretty terrible and some of it's pretty good. Wow, he's actually upcoming in the new Toy Story 4. Believe it or not.
Wow.
So that, with that being said, I think he's kind of hit or miss. I think he either hits. He's one of those guys who either strikes out or hits a home run. There's not a whole lot of in between with Keanu Reeves. So let's talk about the plot of this movie here. There's not much to it. I did want to add something to what you were saying about like this isn't really based on anything. Much like Star Wars, according to the wiki, this is more of a amalgamation of homages than it is based on an actual strict source material. Its scenes drew upon the admiration for anime and martial arts films. I mean, that's pretty obvious. The film pays homage to works such as John Woo's The Killer, Jean-Pierre Melville's Le Cercle Rouge, and La Samurai, John Borman's Point Blank, and the spaghetti western film. So, and I definitely got the spaghetti western element to it.
Oh yeah, I could especially see the John Woo and spaghetti western elements. Everything else, I'm sorry to say, is not familiar to me.
Yeah, sure. Neither am I. All right, so John Wick is married to a woman named Helen, who he had to complete an impossible task. He is a hitman, and he wanted to get out so that he can marry Helen and lead a normal life, and so he completes an impossible task to do so, and so now he's out. But unfortunately, she succumbs to a terminal illness, and right before doing so, she leaves him a beagle puppy named Daisy to help him cope with his grief. So him and the puppy bond, and they're out for a drive in his 1969 Ford Mustang Mach 1, at which point he is accosted, harassed, needled, annoyed by a group of Russian gangsters and a Russian gangster prince named Yosef. And Yosef tries to buy the car, and of course he doesn't want to sell the car, and so Yosef is of course put off by this and says, "Okay, well, later for you, much later." That night, Yosef and some of the Russian henchmen show up to John's house, beat him, kill the puppy, and steal the car.
Yosef is not a smart fucking man.
No, Yosef does not know who Mr. Week is, as we will come to learn. So, they try to get the car. They take it to a chop shop run by John Leguizamo. They try to get the plates changed and everything. And when that's your first sign of, do you know what you've done? When John Leguizamo tells them, like, who did you ask him, who'd you rob to get this car? And they tell him it's John Wick, and he was like, get out of here! Oh no! At which point, Yosef goes back to his dad, and there's a question of why. I think at one point John Leguizamo hits him, and he's like, "But for why?" And then then when he tells him, I robbed some guy named John Wick, the Russian boss was like, "Oh, let me tell you about John Wick." John Wick's the boogeyman. Baba Yaga is what they call him. Because apparently, go Go ahead.
You could almost set the tagline for this movie as "It was then he knew he had fucked up."
Yeah. Can't remember which one it is. I think it's Menace to Society, where you have the one black cop who's like, you fucked up, right? Like, he needed to just kind of walk into the scene, say it, and walk off camera again. So at this point, I mean, and this is where the plot of the movie just sort of dissipates into action scene after action scene after action scene. Basically, John goes, breaks open the floor of his basement where he has cemented over all of his weapons and all of his tools of the trade, the hitman trade. He breaks it all back out again, and he is going to proceed to cut his way through this Russian mob to get to Joseph. And he does. He along the way, one of his friends, who's played by, what the hell's his name?
Willem Dafoe.
William Dafoe. Yes, William Dafoe. So Willem Dafoe plays Marcus, and the Russian gangster attempts to pay him to kill John Wick, which he accepts the money and never really and ends up more helping John than he does trying to hurt him.
He rips him off, is what he does.
Yeah, pretty much. There's a price put on John's head for all the damage that he's doing to this Russian family, one of which is accepted by Adrian Paliki's character, who's another hit person. This is where, so like I said, the plot necessarily, the plot kind of dissipates, but there's a lot of kind of setting up this world. There's a whole bit where John goes into a hitman type hotel that's called the Continental, and the rule is you can't hit anyone on the Continental lest you be excommunicated from this particular lifestyle and you are not afforded any of the comforts or help that are there for you. So that's what happens to her. Anyway, so they fight, and they shoot, and they kill, and eventually John finds Yosef. He ends up killing him. I believe at the end of it, he also kills the father, and he gets a new dog. Him and the dog walk home together. He saves the dog from being euthanized, is what happens. And that's kind of the end of the story. So I'm with you on this one. We don't have to have a particularly stilted conversation about it. Just sort of giving some thoughts here.
I don't know about stilted, but there are definitely some interesting things to say about it.
Yeah, I really liked the first one more than I thought I would. Like I said, I this isn't my kind of thing, but I did.
Why? Well, I'm curious. Okay. Why were you skeptical about it?
I don't find regular humans killing regular humans to be particularly interesting. If there's a war going on, there's a greater purpose to it. I get it, but this was a simple revenge tale. A lot of these movies seem to dwell in the same pool. You know, there's a guy, he has a thing he has to do for reasons he has, and there's an army of people in front of him, and he kills them all. I don't find that particularly interesting. Maybe if he was wearing a shield in a spangly outfit, maybe it'd be different, and he was hitting him on the head with it. You know, maybe if he turned into a big green monster, or he was wearing a high-tech suit of armor, I'd feel differently. But it's guys in suits running around killing other guys in suits. It's hard for me to get invested in that. It's just the way I'm wired. But I wanted to give this a chance. And what I liked about this was it's different from a lot of the other movies I've seen of this type, which turned me off of them in the first place because of how stylized it is. Keanu Reeves had to do a lot of tactical training. We actually talked about this on Damn You Hollywood a bit. He had to do a lot of tactical training to get this stuff right. So one of the big selling points to it is how realistic the fighting is supposed to look. But it's still stylized all its own. So that I could appreciate. You know, Keanu Reeves' delivery of dialogue, especially as it builds to the third movie, but I don't want to get ahead of ourselves or off topic. He has a very a very specific way of delivering dialogue that comes across as very unique to his character and very dramatic and very different from sort of this snarky, smart-assy action hero kind of stuff that you usually see.
Well, I mean, he's playing a pretty fragile, broken man, but not a weak one. He shows that there's a difference. It's not that he's necessarily emotionally or mentally or physically crippled. It's just that between the death of his wife and his being left in kind of a directionless spiral, and then all of a sudden, just when he's found something that can pull him out of it and into the next phase of his life, it gets taken from him. It's more like instead of being fractured, something snaps.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, all that deadly skill set is just completely unchained from emotion, from remorse, from restraint. And he's referred to as a man of focus in the opening few minutes preamble of the second movie. And that is extremely apt. Because he finds his targets, he finds first the man responsible, and then the man who tries to hinder his revenge on that responsible party, and he gives them a very bad case of not being alive anymore. But it's all done with few exceptions, almost entirely divorced from ranting, from monologue. It's just simply there's nothing there for him anymore except for his old life, for just kind of this one last battle, this one last thing that he now has no choice but to clear up. And in that case, that kind of signature, restrained, some would probably joke almost bored sounding delivery that he has in other movies, it works here. God damn it, it works.
Yeah, and those were all things I liked about it. There's very little about it. I think there was some of the fighting got a little redundant to me after a while. I think once you've established he can do X, Y, Z, and they do it, and there's a few variations on the thing, the novelty starts to wear off after a while, and you kind of, you have to up the ante, change things around. Can I spoil John Wick 3 for you?
I'd rather you didn't, because I now have every intention of seeing it. But okay. I can tell you why, even though, as you say, some of the fighting got redundant, why it really didn't bother me.
Before you do, let me say this.
Go ahead.
I'm not going to tell you specifically, but there's bits in John Wick 3. There's a use of a variable that's hysterical, and I didn't see it in any of the other two movies. So this is what I mean by you have to change it up. You have to add things to it. You don't want to get silly. What some movies do. Robert Winfrey and I talked about like the Die Hard series, where some of the action scenes just went so over the top that whatever reality they were trying to establish at some point gets thrown right out the window.
See, but here's why this is kind of lightning in a bottle for Keanu, at least for the two movies that I've seen so far. Some performers, when they're in an action movie, they kind of only know one style,
right,
that they can work with. Arnold Schwarzenegger is an absolute force of nature. Dwayne Johnson is just a smash mouth wrecking ball. Daniel Craig and James Bond is very much just kind of a blunt instrument. Keanu Reeves, he's always going to be most associated with The Matrix as action movies go. And that was very different. He had to go all that super extensive martial arts training and the wire work, and all to accomplish this ethereal style of combat in the virtual world, where just any kind of physical limits are completely forfeit. If you can imagine it, you can manifest it. If you can see yourself flying like Superman and delivering suspended midair jump kicks and using a piece of rebar or whatever, practically like a stripper pole to basically execute a perfect continuous 619 on repeated Agent Smiths, you can do that. But in this, he very clearly was not Neo. He was not Mr. Anderson. This is an entirely different animal, and he transitioned into that more grounded, brutal style of hand-to-hand combat. And I just had to sit back and kind of appreciate. Good for you. You are not Jean-Claude Van Damme executing the same spinning roundhouse kick in every movie. You're not Chuck Norris. You're not Jet Li. You're not Jackie Chan. Even the way you fight, shows that you are treating this character differently. And so it was hard not to admire that.
There's not a whole lot else to. The performances were obviously very good. There were a lot of people who have been in HBO series. Dean Winters, I think, shows up in this. Lance Reddick, who plays the concierge in The Continental. Ian McShane, very famous Hollywood actor. Obviously, Willem Dafoe. Some might say the weakest actor in this is actually Adrienne Palicki, but I like her.
She is.
Alfie Allen, I think, plays Theon in Game of Thrones. So again, you have a pretty strong cast here surrounding Keanu Reeves. So there's no issues with performances there. Overall, and Kevin Nash makes an appearance. I thought was amusing.
Look, kids, it's Kevin Nash. But
I definitely appreciated the different the fighting techniques and styles. I don't have any major criticisms or problems with the original John Wick. It's John Wick 2 that it all starts to fall apart for me. Now, I'll go ahead and say I like John Wick 3 better than John Wick 2. John Wick, the first John Wick, though, is probably my favorite, and I'll force myself to go see John Wick 4 just because I got I got to finish this up. I got to see where this goes now. But for how I landed on that particular notion, you'll have to check out Damn You Hollywood. Do you have anything else you want to talk about with the original John Wick or not? We'll move on to the second one.
There is, and it's something that actually makes a nice transition into why, although I enjoyed John Wick 2, it's by a narrow margin inferior to the first movie. The first one does something, since we're meeting this character for the first time, it does something that so few movies do, and that is it lets the exposition breathe. It allows it to just flow and just happen naturally. So often you have to have just an entire backstory and who a character is force-fed to you. You have to have it's like a Carlos Mencia joke. Someone decided that everything has to be explained to you like you're 5 with puppets. Or in one particularly notorious case, a grand anime sequence about a certain Yakuza boss's childhood. Not here. That is not what happens. What I like about this is we learn the most about who John Wick is based on the way people react to him and the way people act toward him. And it unfolds gradually, such that we don't know much about him at first. We can just tell that he is deeply respected and feared by seemingly everyone. And yeah, you said it best. The The best example of that was John Leguizamo's reaction when they bring in his Mustang and he recognizes it immediately. And he doesn't need to, but he asks, "Where did you get this car?" Because he knows. He knows exactly whose car that is. And it's like at first it was bad enough they stole his car, but then he finds out what they did to his dog.
That's actually one of my favorite elements of this movie is that you have this world that's set up a certain way, people act a certain way, it has its own culture. And to a degree, excuse me, John Wick is acting out of accordance with it, and it's exemplified by everyone in the cast saying to him, "But it was all this over a fucking dog and a car." You know, it's a great repeated refrain because one, nobody realizes the importance of either thing to John. So, so to them it's just a dog and a car, but it's it's so outside the box of appropriate behavior for this group of people. You as a hired assassin are not just supposed to take it upon yourself to decide you're going to gun down an entire mob family. It's out of character.
And the world building unfolds the same way. When he arrives at the hotel, there's no ham-fisted sequence when he has the rules explained to him and everything. We just find out through the unfolding of events that it's neutral ground, that there's no business to be done on the grounds of the Continental. That is strictly verboten. We're not explicitly told the penalty is excommunication, which means death. That's only revealed to us at the end when Adrian Palicki gets her comeuppance. And man, it all unfolds so well, and we're just allowed to learn and come to our own conclusions about this world and this man and this man's past. But then we get to the second, and all of a sudden there's so much less of that to do. And in fact, we kind of have to have everything recapped in just such a ham-fisted exposition dump at the beginning of the movie in order to tie it to the first one. And so it has to lean a lot more heavily on the raised stakes of the action and kind of the enhanced scope and bombast of it all. But I don't know, Mark, do you kind of feel like I did, that it sort of lacked the emotional resonance throughout most of it that the first one had?
See, well, the first one was a very personal revenge tale. He has decided to give this all up and go his own way, and for no other reason than than pride and just being
He's a man for whom change has never come easily, it seems, since he decided to leave the assassin game.
The bad guys in this essentially go after him because they think they can. So you have all of that to deal with, and then it's like you have that very famous line. I think it's from The Godfather. Every time I try to get out, they pull me back in. So you have that going for it, and so it's a very I almost wish there hadn't been any more movies after this. I understand this is Hollywood. Look, nobody understands better than I do that if you have a success on your hands and the willingness of a cast to do another one, you do it. And this did make money, small as the budget as it had. So that's
it's funny you mentioned that. Just this past weekend, on kind of a spur of the moment thing, Carrie and I went out with Alexis and her husband, and we saw Brightburn. I'll call it, not called superhero, the super villain horror story from I believe it was Taika Waititi. And as we left, I refuse to spoil the ending because I want everybody who can legit see this movie without having to sneak into it or be accompanied by a parent to go ahead and see it because it's fucking amazing. But what I said as we left, there was talk and speculation about, oh, I wonder if maybe they're setting up a big world that's going to be centered on everything they've set up here and all the different, other stories that they kind of referenced during the credit scenes. I said, God, I hope not. There are movies that are fine becoming franchises, becoming anthologies, whatever. Sometimes I just like a movie that serves itself perfectly well as a short story.
Yeah.
Don't even give me a novella. Just give me a one-off and whatever note you leave it on, especially on the note this movie ends on, just leave it there.
Mm-hmm.
So
Don't set out to explain anymore. Just leave it alone. And that's kind of what I almost wish John Wick would have done.
Right, that's what I was getting. That's what I was getting to. Like, this is such a tight story, and it's like once it was done, it was done. Like, you only you create chapter 2 out of necessity to make more money, not because there was anything left to tell of this story. It was he completed the mission, and everyone who was out to get him was dead.
Yeah,
and then he had a new dog,
and his former colleagues, seemingly by the end of it, everybody except this Russian family seemed to consider business pretty much settled.
Right. So I feel like John Wick 2. Let's focus on that now. Is like unnecessary. Now it's redeemed with John Wick 3, and that's all I'll say about that. But John Wick 2 definitely just felt like, well, we have a hit on our hands. What else can we do with this character? And I'll go through a very, very quick bare bones plot synopsis, but essentially, yet another crime lord who comes to John and so figures, well, you've just gone ahead and killed a whole bunch of people. Clearly, you're back in business. And John's like, no. This was a one-time thing. This was a one-shot deal. Me and Rob Van Dam. That's it. And he was like, oh, I don't accept that as an answer, so I'm going to blow up your house. And so he does. So John Wick ends up going on the mission for him, and this is the only cool part of the movie for me, is you get to see him go to Italy and another Continental there, and there's sort of, you get a further insight into how this world of hitmen operates. That part of it's pretty cool. That part of it I liked. So the target is the mobster's sister, who, when he finally gets there, she decides, I'm master of my own destiny, and I understand there's no way out of this for me, so fuck it, I'll just kill myself in front of you.
Mm-hmm.
And then the rest of the movie, he's fighting Common and Ruby Rose.
Yep.
And then at the end, after he's done killed all those people, we are back with our mobster friend, who's in the Continental, and John Wick has decided, you have to go. And so he says, that's fine. Well, I'm in the Continental. I'm safe. I'm on base. Base! I'm safe. Because no business may be done in the Continental. And he's taunting John, and he was like, I'll just keep sending people wave after wave of people after you until eventually you end up dead. And John Wick says, I have a better idea, and shoots him in the head. So Ian McShane says, well, now you've done it. You can't do that. I am going to give you 1 hour to get your shit together and run like hell, because at the end of that hour, you are excommunicado. You are ousted from the life, and your life is forfeit. There'll be a contract on your head.
Yep.
And so him and the dog, fuck off. And that's John Wick 2, ladies and gentlemen. This lacked the heart. This lacked the themes of the first one. This lacked the tightness. This one felt more to me like action pornography than the first one did. The first one, like I said, has a lot of heart to it. This one it just felt like an endless stream of action scenes until the end with no real purpose behind it.
Uh, the first movie was about a man who several times in his life had been desperate to let go and find some greener pastures, to find some peace. And what it did to him when his best opportunity to let that happen was stripped away from him. The second movie is about just how deeply that past has its claws sunk into him, and the notion that all that blood on his hands has consequences. And that he has debts to pay. I like the theme. I do. I just don't feel that it resonated quite as potently as the first ones did. It just didn't stick to you.
Yeah.
The first movie, surprisingly, the emotion of it was like a plate of biscuits and gravy. It just sticks to your ribs and hangs around. This movie at times almost felt like Chinese food. It's not like popcorn where you ate it and then a few hours later you completely forgot that you watched it. You remember that you've seen it. It's just that you don't really feel entirely satisfied by what tasted so good going down.
Yeah.
That was some damn good orange chicken, but it didn't leave you feeling really full.
And I'll accept your explanation, but I'm going to tell you right now, John Wick 2 not only did not resonate with me, I was bored. And I wasn't bored with the first or the third one.
Bored, really?
Yeah.
I wouldn't go that far.
Like I said, I know I'm wired a little bit differently. These things in general don't entertain me the way they entertain a lot of other people. Obviously, these things make money. We have a lot of fans just within the network alone of this franchise. But like I said, I'm much more interested in a guy who has loved and lost and feels betrayed by life and the need to, and the need to now take it out on this family after they've wronged him than a guy who's just doing a job, even a guy who's forced to do a job. Like, if they'd blown up his house and he went, and he didn't go after the sister, he decided to go after this guy. And granted, it's redundant of the first movie, but at least that would have made a little bit more sense to me. It would have not made sense. Would have resonated more with me. That it's just kind of a very southern. Why don't you just leave me alone kind of a thing. Watching him do missions isn't fun for me. It's more of the transporter and the equalizer and Schmagegi and who's a futzits.
It was cool for no other reason than to see just kind of how intricately and subtly this world just hides in plain sight. Because we got little tastes of that in the first movie, and then we got a heap and helping more of it in this one.
Right.
But unfortunately, the appeal of that does wear off pretty fast.
Yeah.
You kind of run out of reasons to care.
That's where I found myself. I think at about the time that he killed the sister, I tuned out of the movie, and at that point was just watching it to get through it. Then you have this elongated sequence of endings, and then it doesn't really get interesting then until he's in the Continental with the mob boss, and the mob boss is taunting him, and then he shoots him, and then a much more interesting thing happens, and then the movie ends. Like, everything that's interesting about John Wick 2, unfortunately, doesn't get dealt with until John Wick 3.
Yeah, see, now I want to see John Wick 3 because I have to see how this resolves, and I already know the man lives because I know that John Wick 4 has been greenlit. Let me
quick, and unless there's a whole lot more we're going to say about John Wick 2, I think we've hit
I don't have a whole lot.
Yeah.
Not really.
You have to promise me that when you see John Wick 3 that you think about these words and get back to me on this. We'll have to have an offline talk. You have to tell me what your thoughts were on the last 5 minutes of John Wick 3.
Tell you the last 5 minutes. My last thoughts were on the last 5 minutes of John Wick 3. Okay.
Yes.
You've got a deal.
Speaking of John Wick lives, yeah. I have some issues. A lot of these were discussed on Damn You Hollywood, but I don't want to give away the movie, so I'll just shut up. All right. We have had I think a very entertaining sort of back and forth, passionate discussion of the John Wick movies, but I've sort of run out of gas, so I'm gonna let you have the final word here.
I highly recommend seeing the first one. It is an absolute must-see. If you're a big fan of John Woo, spaghetti westerns, great revenge tales, I guarantee you will walk away from this satisfied. John Wick 2, I can recommend, but I hesitate to call it essential viewing. The action is definitely ramped up, but the stakes unfortunately taper off because the way the first one ends, you wish it would have just left it with John Wick and Senor Puppers walking off into the night to savor their retirement. John Wick 3, I guess I'll make my mind up when I see it, because again, I have to know how this resolves and how it's going to play into John Wick Chapter 4, but without even having seen Parabellum yet, I'm really hoping they're thinking, okay, I think this one is probably going to be it for the movies, and then we'll just take this world and parlay it into comics, maybe a TV show if that works out. I think it would really lend itself well to video games, except there's going to be a lot of snarky opinions of, I've already played this. It was called Hitman. And they'd be right. But yeah, first movie is surprisingly artful, not something you expect from a modern action movie, and it is a bona fide must-see.
All right. This week, and let me first tell you, yesterday, Jesse and I ended up reviewing AEW Double or Nothing. That's up in the archives. Now, tomorrow, Damn You Hollywood, with myself, Robert Winfrey, and Alexis Hana will be reviewing the new Aladdin. Metal Hammer of Doom, we've got the new Sworn Enemy. And then we were supposed to do this last Friday, but we had some schedule changes. So we're doing it Thursday. Extremely Wicked, Shockingly Evil, and Vile. A movie even my wife and I could sit through together. It was a lot of fun watching.
Is that the Ted Bundy movie?
It really, yeah. If you haven't seen it yet, it's definitely worth a watch. June 1st, day before my birthday. Anthony Joshua, Andy Ruiz Jr., myself, Robert Winfrey, and Pat Mullen will be doing alternate commentary for that fight, which will be on DAZN. And then Sunday, Chris Bailey, and Jesse Starcher and I, and maybe Chris Sheehan, we're not quite sure yet, will be reviewing NXT TakeOver, the one, whatever this one is called. Yeah, sure. Whatever the one in Connecticut it's called. Next week, it's Godzilla all day, every day. We've got Godzilla Kingdom of Monsters on Monday on Source Material. And then we'll be reviewing Godzilla King of the Monsters, which will be out in theaters. The new Allegiant, one of Jesse's favorite bands, on Wednesday. On Thursday, myself and Sean will be doing an on trial for the Matthew Broderick cinematic classic, Godzilla 1998. Oh, a fun time will be had by all. Alexis Hana wants to do a commentary for the Godzilla film. We might try to sneak that in at some point during the week. We'll see how much time we've got to do all of that. So that's it for now. Sean, you got any twitching going on? You twitching? You carrying it on? You playing video games? What are you doing?
Oh, of course, you know me. I'm always gaming. I'm back to streaming for the time being for right now on a semi-regular basis. I'm trying to get in a few hours every other day. You can find me on twitch.tv/ComerCodex. Typically, you will find me playing probably either Overwatch or Apex Legends, or I'm trying to decide on a good single-player game that I want to get to as soon as I finish the Spider-Man DLC. So that's still up in the air. But If you want to suggest anything, if you want to keep track of when I'm going to be streaming, you can follow me on Twitter at Comer Codex. I can tell you that this summer I'm going to be moving to becoming a daytime streamer just because of the way mine and Lady Jetbear's schedules shake out. I'm probably going to be streaming at noon Central Time most days until about 2 or 3 o'clock. But yeah, best way to keep track of that is to follow or subscribe to me on Twitch and or follow me on Twitter. That's about it for the time being. A quick recommendation, since remind me, we're doing an on trial with the '98 Godzilla movie, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, funny. I just watched a 20-minute retrospective last night on Matty McMuscle's channel on YouTube. His awesome series, What Happened, has expanded from just talking about video game failures into now talking about botched movies. And he spent what was a surprisingly eye-opening, about I think like 23 minutes talking about every single little thing that went wrong with this stupid piece of shit. I'm going to be watching that heavily for research, and also because he's entertaining as hell. I miss Super Best Friends, but goddamn, it's been worth it to see Matty go solo.
Well, I will. It'll be a spirited debate then. I'm not kidding when I tell you the 1998 Godzilla is one of my guilty pleasures. And I'll give away a little bit of my defense. If you don't actually think about it as a classic Toho Godzilla film, it's a great monster movie. And I will detail the trivia behind why absolutely nobody should think of it as one, because it is hysterical. Well, I'll tell you what. I was never a big Godzilla fan, to be honest with you. I've never watched the old movies or whatever, and so when the 2014 one came out, this is why I didn't have a problem with the 98 one. It was like, it's fine. The humor's a little stupid at times, but for the most part, I'm like, oh, it's a cool monster movie. I actually liked the realism they brought to it, about this thing was basically a mutated lizard. And understanding now that that's not Godzilla, I get it, and I get why people got angry about it, and that's kind of like the big prosecuting item that you've got going for you, is that they call this anything else, it's whatever, whatever you want it to be, but by calling it Godzilla, that's already got a strike against it. And that never became more clear to me than watching the 2014 Godzilla, where Godzilla shows up in, like, the shadows, or off screen, or, as the camera's moving away. Oh, God. I know people loved it. That drove me right up the wall. See, the thing you got to remember when comparing the 98 Godzilla to the 2014 Godzilla, one of those was a project that Toho wholeheartedly endorsed, right,
and was on board with, and they were even willing to kind of lend a hand to help expand the universe. The other introduced a creature whose rights Toho purchased just so they could have their monster kill it. I'm going to let you figure out which one was which.
Clearly the latter was 2014.
Yes,
which I find interesting.
Really, Mark, you figured it out.
All right. With that said, this has been Long Road to Ruin, and thanks, Sean, for coming on again. We'll see you all next week. Be well, be safe, and behave. Got to get money.
The Starlight Lounge presents an evening with the Progressive Box.
Old moon, yeah. That's Hugo, tickling the ivories. He just saved by bundling home and auto with Progressive. Gonna finally buy a ring for that gal of yours, Hugo? Send her my condolences. Hi-oh! This next one's for you two. There's a burglar in my heart. Thank you.
Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Discounts not available in all states or situations.
Let's say you just bought a house. Bad news is, you're one step closer to becoming your parents. You'll proudly mow the lawn, Ask if anybody noticed you mowed the lawn. Tell people to stay off the lawn. Compare it to your neighbor's lawn. And complain about having to mow the lawn again. Good news is, it's easy to bundle home and auto through Progressive and save on your car insurance, which, of course, will go right into the lawn. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company, affiliates, and other insurers. Discount not available in all states or situations.